I'm Lisa Kerkebane. I'm a senior this year studying psychology and theater arts, and my research is primarily in the health psychology realm.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joan. I am also a senior. This is my last term. I'm a psychology major with a minor in global health.
Hi, my name is Desirae. I'm a senior as well. My major is sociology and my minor is French.
Hi, I'm Heather McClure, and I work in the College of Education. I direct the Center for Equity Promotion, and I have had the amazing honor of working with Yomaida.
So a couple students.
Hi, I'm Ashley Easter. I'm a senior as well. I'm in the Family and Human Services Department, and I'll be graduating in a couple weeks.
I think we also have Tristan.
Yeah, I was waiting since I don't have a video and I'm just kind of a disembodied voice.
You are totally fine.
So my name's Tristan. I am also in keeping with the theme, a graduating senior this year. I'm a biochemistry major with a minor in ethics. And I just very recently got on the research train. So my stuff's pretty new, but I've been working with Dr. Snodgrass in the anthropology department, taking a look mostly actually at the recent evolution and some of the mechanisms for infection of coronaviruses specifically. So something rather, I guess, pertinent to the times.
Yeah. And I think that's all of our students.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for the introductions. And I know we have to be kind of gentle timekeepers this evening because we have lots of folks and we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to present. And so I think without further ado, we're going to turn things toward Nina, who is going to present the first this evening.
Yes, I am going to share my screen for my poster. Okay, so as I said earlier, my name is Nina Kerkebane. I am a senior. I am majoring in economics and minoring in math. My topic is around the impact of higher tuition on the enrollment of low-income students. I know I presented last year, but I didn't have results. Now I have some results. I'm really excited to share. So a little bit of background. The literature in economics has identified an increase in income inequality, especially since the 1980s. And here we're referring to children not having access to higher socioeconomic classes as their parents did as much as before. And also most of the literature in economics agrees that higher education is the main path for intergenerational socioeconomic mobility. And that's why I think it's important to talk about higher education in economics. So the data that I'm using is panel data from the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, mouthful, so we'll call it IPEDS, which consists of administrative data reported by all US colleges and universities that participate in financial aid programs. And I'm taking about 2,462 colleges and universities all around, all for 2-year and 4-year institutions, and focusing on degree granting institutions at this time. So the main outcome in this analysis is annual enrollment, and the main covariate of interest is the cost of attendance. And here I'm looking at cost of attendance of students who are on campus and who are in state for this specific analysis. And my data also includes the share of students who are Pell Grant recipients. And this data is from 2011 to 2016 is what I have data for. And so for my model, I am using a fixed effect model and a log-log specification to estimate elasticity. I'm using the log specification for ease of interpretation and also for improved model fit. And I'm including the institution effect, specific effect, to control for all time invariant characteristics about the college or the university. And for the year is to control for cohort specific effects. So as you can see in the methodology section, I'm regressing log enrollment on price, which here price, I'm talking about cost of attendance. And then also regressing log on Pell and Pell enrollment, which here is the share of enrolled students who are Pell recipients. And the further analysis will be also doing the same thing with share of different demographic groups and gender on the cost of attendance. So some of the results, as you can see, actually are consistent with the law of demand, which is always good. We see negative correlation. As the price goes up or the cost of attendance goes up, we see a decrease in enrollment for all students, but especially for Pell Grant recipients. And even though these results are statistically significant, we can't really talk about causality or real impact here. We have to do a lot more analysis. And so my next steps, besides looking at different demographic groups and gender, I'm also going to look at community colleges because they serve a different population. So that will be interesting to look at that. And I am also going to determine the elasticity of demand. And that's all I got.
I'm willing to go next if we're looking for Okay, hi everyone. My name is Matthew Dawson. This is my project, Cell-Specific Ablation, a pilot for modeling social circuitry in zebrafish. So a little bit of background. So zebrafish are highly social, which makes them a great model for understanding social behaviors. The circuitry behind social behaviors continues to be enigmatic as well as difficult to model. And through selective ablation, we can find populations of interest that are necessary for performing the social behaviors. And lastly, this knowing the circuitry will help provide insight into neural connections and atypical social behavior, as well as in, more informed hypothesis testing. So the hypothesis of my project was basically that ablation of these unique populations will allow for us to find those that are necessary for the social behavior. And I guess I should explain, ablation is literally just like cell death. So we're basically killing cells and seeing what effect this has on social behaviors in fish. And so I generated a cross. So I mated 2 fish, and then I selected from the offspring fish that were either green or red. And this is from a fluorescent protein. And the red fluorescent protein is indicative of a enzyme that we have put in that allows for me to induce this ablation using an antibiotic. So once I do that, I put the fish into a virtual social assay. And lastly, I dissect brains for confocal microscopy. So what we have here is 4 images from 4 different lines. And these are the forebrains of the zebrafish. And all the black that you see here is the cells that are expressing this red fluorescent protein. And of these 4 lines, 3 of them did not exhibit any sort of social difference that was clear. But in my 4th line, I found a very pronounced difference in social behavior. So I should have said the red line on these graphs is the ablated fish, while the blue line is the non-ablated. And then this is line 4, where we saw that decrease in social behavior. Further, I also found that the ablated fish from line 4 showed much higher average speed during the assay than the non-ablated fish, which is really interesting because if a fish is performing less socially, you might expect that they would also be moving slower or not faster. That's definitely not something that you would expect, I think. And yeah, so basically for future directions, I would like to enhance the resolution of my images through antibody labeling, as well as increased image size, and as well as finding more populations that are necessary. This is just one singular population of neurons that is necessary for the social behavior. And then to map out that whole circuitry, we would need, a fair amount of them. And once we have, a fair amount of these populations defined, we can use computational analysis that would allow for us to render an average brain and start mapping the neurons onto that average brain. That's it.
Hey, Matt. By average
Yeah.
brain, do you mean average fish brain?
Yes. So we would collect all of our samples and put them through this computational analysis that would give me a morphologically average brain.
Cool, thank
Because
you.
as you may imagine, brains will differ in size and shape, and then how you image them will change orientation and stuff.
Cool.
Maybe Faith next?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. All right, can everyone see that? Cool. All righty. Well, hello, my name is Faith Collins, and I am representing the Department of Psychology's Computational Social Neuroscience Lab, which is directed by Dr. Robert Chavez. All the material that I'm presenting today is a subset of Dr. Chavez's replication of his original round robin project. So let's just jump in. So previous research has demonstrated that neural response during self-referential thought are recapitulated in the brains of close friends thinking about the self. However, we also know that these processes are influenced by affective valence of the stimuli. So affective valence is best understood as positive states or negative states. So for example, enthusiastic has a positive valence, whereas sad has a negative valence. And we understand that these processes recruit similar areas of the medial prefrontal cortex, which is an area of the brain that is activated during self-referential thought. And by self-referential thought, I mean literally you thinking about yourself. So our question here is a subject's positive self-representation similar to the group's positive representation of that target over and above how the group sees somebody else? So we sought to test this question by recruiting small groups of close-knit individuals in a round-robin fMRI design. So we collected 20 groups, and each group consisted of 5 to 6 people. And these groups were of academics, friend groups, local businesses whose age ranged from 18 to 55 years old with a mean age of 23. And out of the 114 participants, 44 of whom were female, everyone was monetarily compensated for their time. So each member was brought into the scanner individually to do a trait adjective task. And so during this trait adjective tasks, subjects reflected on positive and negative traits both about themselves and their group members to estimate the neural response to self and every other person in their group. So for example, they would go into the scanner and they'd see self followed by the word enthusiastic. And then they'd hit yes or no to whether or not they saw themselves as an enthusiastic person. And then they'd see Roger followed by angry. And then they'd hit yes or no to whether or not they saw Roger as an angry person. So there was a total of 5 runs. Half of the total words were negative and the other half were positive. And in a full round robin design, everyone was a target and a perceiver, and all words were used with every single target. So after collection, we used a multivariate pattern analysis to compare average voxel brain activity of positive self to the average positive representation the group had of that person. So simply, we took subject 1, thinking about themselves, and took the average voxel brain activity. And then we took every single person thinking about subject 1 and collapsed their brain activities into like a single voxel pattern. And then we were able to compare these brain representations to find the correlation between subject 1 thinking about themselves and all their group members thinking about subject 1. So we hypothesized that positive self-representation, so what this would be, was going to be similar to the positive group's representation of this target, which would have been this. And then after that, we ran a correlation distance between incongruent and congruent trials. So congruent trials are when we take subject 1 thinking about themselves compared to everybody else thinking about subject 1. So this right here is a congruent trial. An incongruent trial would be taking subject 1 thinking about themselves and compare that to everybody else thinking about a different group member. So if there was like a third brain here, it'd be a separate person. So this right here are correlation distances between incongruent and congruent trials, and smaller values on the y-axis indicate more similarity between brain representations. So for example, if we look right here, how there's space in between those dots, that means that they're less similar in neural representations of each other. Whereas here, where these dots are practically overlapping, that means that there's more similarity in those brain representations. So from the correlation distances, we were able to conclude that positive congruent trials, or the green dots, were significantly different than positive incongruent trials, which are the red dots, but in a direction that was inconsistent with our hypothesis, such that positive congruent trials were less similar than positive incongruent trials. And so simply, positive self-representation was less similar than the group's positive representation of that person. We're still unsure and investigating why this direction was different than what we anticipated it to be. One reason that we thought of was because humans intrinsically are positive self-biased, and so we think of ourselves in more of a positive light than maybe our peers think about us. But this just gives insight to how valence affects social dynamics and interpersonal perception. Any questions? Oh, sorry, I'm trying to unshare my screen. Cool, thank you.
I wonderfully have many powers in this space.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Maybe if Ashley wants to present.
Yes, I do. I'm just not sure. Okay, there we go. I can share my screen.
Yes.
I think. Okay. There we go. Okay. Can you all see? Let's see.
Yes, we see an internet browser screen that is being loaded into a poster.
There we go. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you can also see me, but that's okay. We're just going to talk about the poster. Can you all hear me?
You can.
Okay, wonderful. So again, I'm Ashley Easter. You know, I'm a senior here at the University of Oregon. And today I'm sharing with you the data I've analyzed on a rural Oregon town and its eating habits to explore barriers to healthy eating behaviors for those residents. I examined resident survey responses to questions regarding perceptions of fresh fruit and vegetable availability and costs of those fresh fruit and vegetables in the rural town against residents' educational attainment and income. 151 residents of the rural Oregon town participated in the survey, and their demographics are shown at the center of the poster. Using SPSS, 4 chi-squares were conducted to explore these associations. No association was found between residents' perception of fresh fruit and vegetable availability and their educational attainment or their income. However, a moderate association was present between cost of healthy food as a barrier to healthy eating and low educational attainment. Additionally, a strong association was present between cost of healthy food as a barrier to healthy eating and lower income residents. What does this mean? It means residents of the town with lower income and lower educational attainment are less likely to purchase and consume fresh fruit and vegetables because of perception of cost. Why does it matter? Low consumption of fresh fruit and vegetable intake has been associated with chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and some cancers. And as you can see in the background, adults living in rural areas are more likely
Are there people not hearing Ashley right now?
Yeah, I can't hear either.
Oh.
care.
Oh, Ashley, you cut out there for a bit.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm not sure where I lost you guys. Let's see. So strategies aimed at helping individuals improve the ability to identify and prepare less costly food with higher nutritional value may be effective in improving rural.
Oh, I think you went out again. No.
Program consisting of low-cost cooking classes available to low-income residents that includes education about what healthy eating is, how to buy fresh fruit and vegetables seasonally and at a low cost, and how best to store and preserve fresh fruit and vegetables to maximize their cost benefits. Finally, I'd be interested in doing a follow-up survey with the town's residents to examine how the pandemic may be affecting their eating practices now. Thank you. Okay. Stop share. Yay. Okay, there we go.
Yay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Okay.
I don't have a poster presentation. I have a slideshow, but I can go next.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, that works great.
Wonderful.
And we are seeing everything that I think you mean us to see right now.
Yes. And you guys, everyone can hear me?
Yep.
Affirmative.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Yomaira Tarula Aranda, and first and foremost, I want to give a thank you to my faculty mentor, Heather McNair, and the Center for Equity Promotion. This is how I was able to do my research, which is on stress and implications for poor mental and physical health among Latinx emerging adults. So to give an overview real quick about my research, this explores how stress is very prevalent among Latinx emerging adults, ages 18 to 23, and the potential contributing factors, because stress is related to an assortment of negative outcomes, including development of poor mental and physical health and other outcomes. And this research uses data from the Latinx Emerging Adults Project, Emerging Adult and Peer Survey, created by the Center for Equity Promotion. And to measure stress, I would use the perceived stress scale to measure frequency, severity, and perceived control individuals have over daily stressors within a 1 month period. And the higher the perceived stress score, ranging from 0 to 40, the higher the perceived stress. And my analysis explores potential differences in Latinx emerging adults scores by different social demographic characteristics. And so my research methods that I used is the perceived stress scale. And some of the questions that 20 participants, Latinx emerging adults, were asked was, for example, how often have you been upset because of something that happened unexpectedly? This is more about feeling more rather than experience. And it was a set of 10 questions, and I added up all their scores, again, ranging from 0 to 40. The data I collected based off these 4 different social demographic characteristics, which is sex, 12 participants being female, making up 60%, 6 participants being male, and 2 having no response. I looked at employment from not being employed to working 26 to 40 plus hours weekly. And then from education, from some high school but not graduated, up to having a college bachelor's degree. And finally, country of origin, 13 participants being born in the United States and 5 being born in Mexico and Central America. So before I go into my results, I just really want to break down what these scores, what they interpret. So 0 to 13 would be considered low stress. Scores ranging from 14 to 26 would be considered moderate stress. And scores ranging from 27 to 40 would be considered high perceived stress. So these are the results. The average perceived stress score of all 20 participants was 18.6, and standard deviation being 5.2. And so in these different subcategories in between female and male, the mean average, females had a higher perceived stress scale, being 19.5 compared to 14.7. In terms of education, you see that the highest score was a 20, being 1 participant that has some high school but not graduating. And I really want to highlight that the higher the education, the lower the score decreases. And that, now as people obtain, higher education, especially Latinx, they're entering the system, they're able to, get jobs, right? Be able to socially mobilize. From being low income to middle income, right? And then here in terms of employment, we see that not employed 4 participants, they had an average score of 19. And then we see 26 to 40 hours weekly being a 17.25. And I also want to highlight that in that category, it was mostly participants that had already graduated, compared to the highest score was a 20, which was 5 participants working 11 to 25 hours, juggling school and their balancing school and a job. So that stress they have extra on their shoulders. And then finally, we see country of origin, 13 participants being born in the United States. They had a higher perceived stress score, being 18.6, compared to foreign-born Mexico and Central Americans that had a score of 16. And what that implies, there's a lot of research that proves and shows that the longer you stay in the United States, the longer you are to develop poor and physical mental health. Because, and that most of the participants except one have lived more than half of their life in where they were born, Mexico and Central America. And with that, we see, they're able to really develop their identity, their foreign-born identity, hold on to those values compared to a Latinx person that's born in the United States and kind of really having to assimilate to this new system, right? This new education, these new norms and standards to be able to survive and thrive in America. And then finally, so again, the average perceived stress score of all participants was 18.6, and that falls in between what would be considered moderate stress. But I do want to point out that most of my scores, the scores of the participants did fall into that range, but I did have a participant that did fall into the 27 to 40, very high perceived stress, and 2 participants falling in that considered low stress. So what do these scores mean, right? The higher the perceived stress score, it has been linked to a risk for development of poor physical and mental health, depressive symptoms, failure among diabetics to control blood sugar levels, more colds, failure to quit smoking, elevations in stress hormones, inflammation, which can increase risk of cardiovascular disease. And to conclude, this research is really important for me to examine and understand because it is very real in my life. As a Latinx person, I see the stress that I endure myself, my family, the consequences of that, right? Having high blood pressure, experiencing these mental health symptoms, but not really, it's not really acknowledged within the Latinx community, with the stigma especially. So for me, it was very impactful to understand these numbers, to have facts, right, that really back up what is happening within the Latinx community in terms of, poor physical and mental health. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me.
It's so fun watching the different people kind of pop out of video for a second. It's like, yes, see, haha, like the wonderful Zoom mechanics we find ourselves in nowadays.
I appreciate the support.
Yeah. Okay, maybe Lisa, would you be willing to give us an update on your project? Well, you are still muted.
Absolutely,
yes. There we go.
yes. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, are you all able to see this poster?
Yes.
It's in a PowerPoint window, so it's a little small. I don't know if you want to present it. Yeah, and we're seeing that.
Better? Okay, fantastic. So this project is a secondary analysis out of the College of Education under Dr. Nicole Kelly in the Prevention Science Institute. So this is somewhat related to the work that Ashley Easter was talking about with rural Oregon communities and some of the health disparities that affect them relative to their urban counterparts. So this specific research project was intending to look at the potential association between trait anxiety and total energy intake in pre-adolescent children. So what's meant here by trait anxiety trait anxiety is different than general anxiety disorder or a pathological, like a full threshold psychiatric diagnosis. Trait anxiety are sort of self-reported, enduring characteristics of worry or affective sort of inhibition. And we wanted to look at if that is related to caloric intake, or more specifically, energy intake. Energy intake is a little bit different than caloric intake because it does account for, or in our conceptualization of it, we account for energy expenditure. So you may have heard, you know, the premise of the energy balance model of adiposity, which basically says if you eat more calories than you're expending, it's going to turn into fat in the body. So using that model, we're looking here at energy intake relative to energy expenditure and what might contribute to surpluses in energy intake specifically. So we're looking at a potential association between trait anxiety and total energy intake after we control for body composition, which we know has a lot to do, it's highly correlated with energy intake. So the more lean mass a person has, the higher their caloric need is, and this influences the way that they eat. So we're controlling for lean mass and body fat, and we're looking at that potential association between trait anxiety and total energy intake. And then we wanted to see if behavioral disinhibition or a lack of inhibitory control actually moderates that association. Does behavioral disinhibition interact with trait anxiety to change the way that people eat? Our hypothesis here was that children who have high trait anxiety and high behavioral disinhibition are going to eat the most. We're going to see the highest energy intake from those kids. So our sample was 72 pre-adolescent children, approximately 9 years old, mean age of 8.9 years. Exclusionary criteria included things like major medical diagnoses, psychiatric diagnosis, medication that would affect weight or appetite, and then any significant dietary restrictions because of the defendant outcome being caloric intake. So what we did is we looked at self-reported state trait anxiety in relationship to calories consumed during a standardized buffet style lunch. So the kids get, they're served like a buffet style lunch. They self-serve and self-select all of their foods. And then essentially there's a nutritional analysis done to see not only what the total caloric intake was, but all of the macronutrient intake as well. Behavioral disinhibition or inhibitory control is measured here by the stop signal paradigm. So this is a task wherein we ask the participant to press a button as soon as they see a stimulus, unless they hear a stimulus. So if you see the picture, push the button. If you hear the ding after you see the picture, do not press the button. And essentially from here, we are able to calculate a latency to inhibition. So this sense of approximately how long did it take them to not press the button, as it were. So using a hierarchical multiple regression, essentially what we found is that in this particular sample, which was slightly underpowered, we did not actually see an association. We didn't find a correlation between trait anxiety and total caloric intake as we expected to see. However, when we checked that interaction, we did find that behavioral disinhibition moderated that association. So what that means is that we did find that children specifically with high behavioral disinhibition, whether or not they had low or high trait anxiety, significantly affected the total calories that they consumed. For those children who had low behavioral disinhibition, they didn't have any issue there. We didn't see a significant effect on their total caloric intake. So these findings are particularly interesting because it tells us something about the nuance with which anxiety might be related to caloric intake. And because anxiety, and particularly subclinical anxiety, is something that is measurable and prevalent in children as young as 4 years old, it may be an early way to spot kids that might be at risk for some of these destructive behavioral patterns or behavioral patterns that have significant developmental effects, and to intercede with intervention early. So that's the nature of this project. Thank you so much.
Lisa, your poster is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Good. Perhaps Megan, if you want to share your project.
Kind of, sure.
Kind of, sure.
So I'll give you an update. I don't have my poster done yet, just because data is still coming in or still being calculated. But to give you all like I guess a works in progress, I was looking at how sound impacted our autonomic nervous system, specifically looking at HRV, so heart rate variability, how your heart rate varies over a certain period of time. And what I did is through a meta-analysis, so I ended up having about 9,000 papers that I turned into about 18. So I've read a lot, and I've spent a lot of time there. And with those 18 papers, I basically took all of the means and standard deviations for the sounds that they used, which I categorized into arousing or relaxing, which is kind of like a really, it's not a very strict categorization because it really varies. Also, there's opinion, so people might find one sound arousing and one sound relaxing, and it just doesn't overlap with other people. So I kind of took the liberty from other papers and other information to make that decision on what was arousing and relaxing. And with those means and standard deviations, I took their sample sizes and I basically weighted the means and standard deviations so that with my data, I could come up with an effect size for the specific HRV measure that I was looking at. And for a little like peek into what we're seeing, because I don't exactly have an answer yet, we're really seeing a very, very small effect of both arousing and relaxing sounds on HRV measures. But there's not a big difference between arousing and relaxing. There's just both affecting HRV or arousal or your autonomic nervous system, so your fight or flight.
Thank you so much for sharing. Let's go back to my list. Desirae, would you be willing to share your project now?
Yes, hello.
What's up?
Can you see my poster?
Yes, we see the PowerPoint screen. Maybe if you want to do the play from start, that'll make it a little easier.
Okay, now can you see?
Wonderful, yes. We see it and we hear you.
Okay, so hi, my name is Desirae, and my research focused on Black student protests at the University of Oregon, and it focused on two, can you still see it?
There we go. Yeah. So just don't hit any of the buttons because it'll advance to the next slide, which doesn't exist.
Okay, and so it focused on two specific time periods of Black students demanding similar action plans from the University of Oregon administration. And so to do this, I started my work by researching the campus racial climate in Eugene, as well as the overall Lane County and the city of Eugene. And so I found that the small population of Blacks who originally inhabited the Eugene area arrived between 1945 and 1950. However, their arrival wasn't largely supported by the city. There were actually city ordinances that said no persons other than the Caucasian race could own, rent, or lease any land homes in Eugene. Despite this, the Black community here was able to continue to thrive as well as fight against the city and their rebuttal against them. And so these early efforts continued into the 1960s, which is where we see that first wave of protest at the University of Oregon. So in April 1968, the Black Student Union Task Force issued their list of grievances and demands, which are shown here. The list here is not verbatim, but it shows the overall gist of the demands. So the list of grievances explain the frustrations of the experiences of covert and overt racism at the University of Oregon. And so the demands include the need for a Black center, financial aid that is specific to Black students, as well as changes in the curriculum. And so below, I kind of have some conclusions after those 1968 demands. Then UO President Fleming established a committee on racism to kind of research the demands that were put forth by the students. And on this committee included different administration figures as well as different members of the U of O community. The Black Center was opened in Fenton Hall in 1973, so 5 years after those original demands were met. And that center kind of served as a study space, a tutoring space, as well as just a meeting center for Black students at this time. So as we can see, the UO did make efforts to support these demands, and we're still seeing changes 5 years later, which is similar to the most recent wave of protest in 2015. So, yeah, similar to the wave of protests and demands in the late 1960s. In 2015, the Black Lives Matter movement was at its heights, and people around the country and around the world were highlighting their frustrations with just the experiences of racism and discrimination in the country and in their cities and at their institutions. So in November 2015, the U of O received another list of demands from the University of Oregon Black Student Task Force. And similarly to the time in 1968, Black students were asking for a Black Cultural Center, a Black Studies program, financial support specific to Black students again, as well as residential representation at the school. So 5 years later, less than 50% of these demands have been met. And as of 2020, the university has not publicly addressed fulfilling the rest of the demands. However, the most recent change due to these demands was the opening of the Black Cultural Center, which opened in fall 2019, which was met with lots of support from the University of Oregon. However, it should not be the last stop of the university. There still should be change for Black student retention, enrollment, and overall support. And that is it. I can't hear anyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we're all muted. Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. Val, would now be a good time for you to share your project? I know you were waiting on your mentor and I wanted to make sure they were here. You are still muted, yes.
Yes.
Yay.
Let me just share my screen. Wait. Okay. Okay, now, perfect.
Yes, and we see the screen as I believe you intend us to.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, perfect. So hello again. My name, as I said before, is Val Arbones Flores. I am a student at the University of Puerto Rico. I study history of the Americas and Portuguese. And what I'm going to present to you all tonight, technically for me, is a research project that I am going, that it's my honors thesis basically, and it's in progress, and I'm supposed to defend next semester. So the title of my project is To Whomever Wants to Write This Novel, towards an approximation, towards a hypertextual approximation of Museo de la Novela de la Eterna by Macedonio Fernández. So as the title suggests, the purpose of this work is to imagine and enhance Museo, which is the name that I'm going to be using from now on to reference the novel. So I'm trying to enhance Museo to a hypertext through an analysis of its literary form. So we need to start off with the basics. Who was Macedonio Fernández, and why is it important for us to know about him? To talk about Macedonio's life is a very complicated endeavor, since what we know about him is because of a mythification that was created throughout the years of his figure. However, put simply, he was an Argentinian writer born in 1874. He studied law, but he stopped practicing shortly after, decided to retire and write full-time without being interested in publishing the text that he wrote. So he was jumping from apartment to apartment without trying to pay anything. Because of his age, he was technically part of the modernist generation in Argentina, but nothing in the way that he wrote made him a part of it. He was more fond of the generation that came after, the ultraist movement led by Jorge Luis Borges. And we can see that he gained a lot of popularity by how fond ultraists like Borges were of him and his writing. So we know of Museo de la Novela de la Eterna thanks to Adolfo Ovieta, which was one of his 4 sons. Ovieta forced his father to give him the novel so he could publish it, obviously under Macedonio's name, but he forced his father to publish it. In 1967, in collaboration with the Latin American Publishing Center, Ovieta published the first edition of Museo. Curiously, what we know of Macedonio is through the voice of others and not directly through him. So you see the importance of this mythification of his figure. So we know a lot about Macedonio through Jorge Luis Borges, like I mentioned, but also through Ricardo Piglia. He actually created this very interesting documentary about Macedonio's life, and has honored, well, he honored his figure in one of his novels too. So my research problem here arises in the process of researching the novel and the different editions that came after 1967. Museo was not a very popular novel at the time of its release. A lot of readers and scholars have deemed it unreadable. So why is that? I realized after spending months trying to understand the novel that the problem is with its medium. If we were to change the medium, would our understanding of it change? That is when I realized that I needed to try and convert it from text to hypertext. So under normal circumstances, I would have stopped myself from doing this experiment, because most writers have an intention behind their work and they don't want people to change those intentions. But Macedonio was not one of those writers. His intentions are not clear to us as readers. And what is most interesting is that he acknowledges a certain typology of readers that will engage with his novel Museo. So it is this admittance of different readers that allow me as a researcher to play around with the text and even recompile it, since there is no way to know the order that Macedonio wanted to give to his novel. Or how he would have compiled it. So in Museo, Macedonio introduces us to 3 types of readers: the skipping reader, the stained glass window reader, and the outcome readers. And I just realized that it's in Spanish because I presented this research in Spanish, but you more or less get the idea that there's a typology of readers. He dedicates an entire prologue to these readers, where he warns to the stained glass readers. He dedicates a prologue, and he warns them of the situation when these readers will go through. So, and I quote, "So if the reader doesn't read on, I'm not to blame for not warning them. It is too late for the author who does not write to meet with the reader who does not read. Now I write decisively. There are also the outcome readers, which would be the ones in the middle, the ones in the middle. And he also admits their existence in a prologue called or named At the Gates of the Novel, Anticipación del Relato. He defines them as the only readers that he will discard entirely from the novel, given that he understands that with so much deviation from the story, these readers will get tired of not finding any indication of a specific development of the novel. Therefore, they will leave the novel aside because they do not find any solution or resolution in it. And then we come to the skipping readers. Macedonio dedicates a whole other prologue to them. He welcomes them as they are the only ones that will be able to read his novel after all. Macedonio wakes us up in this point of the novel from a dream of eternal confusion in this prologue as it offers us a moment of resolution. We have unknowingly become skipping readers. And so hypertextuality in this project helps me see how if we change the medium of the novel, we can all become skipping readers. Hypertextuality is understood as a form that structures content, signs, images, multimedia. George P. Landau, who writes in the 90s, suggests that within hypertextuality, there are various ways to integrate or adapt printed text to hypertext. We can see, as Landau suggests, in adaptations to hypertext, 14 Paths by Jorge Luis Borges, a transition from traditional textuality to hypertextuality. So think of it as like a transition from a printed text to a text on a digital platform, for example. Now I will be showing you 2 examples of conversions from text to hypertext that have helped me in my research project. So the first one is the novel Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov. This novel includes a 999 poem, Encantos, that were assumed to be given to the main character in the novel as index cards. In the first edition of the novel, we as readers would have to imagine and assume that what we are reading were index cards. But in 2011, Gigco Press published a box set that included the 999 line poem in index cards along with other materials. Another example would be Spinoza's Ethica. This philosophical text is hard to understand because of Baruch Spinoza's intent to propose an ethica based on mathematical logic. But in 2018, scholar and artist Patrick Fontana decided to experiment a little with its content, and now he has built an entire website with a hypertextual ethica, and what's most exciting, he is building an entire online community of scholars and readers of Spinoza's. So how am I doing this conversion? I started out by limiting myself to converting the prologues, all 58 of them, since they are what I realized make this novel somewhat hypertextual. And it is the part that is most confusing to its readers. I decided to photocopy all the prologues and analyze each one of them, and give them a category. My mentor offered me to just told me to cut all of the pages from the book, but I decided to just photocopy it. It was just wild. These categories were literary critique, metaphysics, readers, characters, and author. I gave each paper a color, and once that was done, I could now focus on moving it to a digital space by translating those same categories, titles of the prologue, and text to a data set so that I could then create a data visualization that was interactive and could be accessed from a website. So what you hopefully see here, which hopefully, is it moving? Perfect, excellent. Is a video of the website that I have created to put the data visualization after I am done with it. It is still not live, it's still coming soon. There will be sections that will explain the project, the research process, who I am as a researcher, and my intentions behind the project. So I am also inspired by the project by the Ethica by Fontana. I'm hoping to create a community online of scholars that are interested in Macedonio Fernández, which are a lot, but they're very segmented throughout the world. So very ambitious. So this here is an image of what the data visualization would look like after 1, it is finished, and 2, it is uploaded in the website. With this project, I not only hope to create a community that engages with this content in an educational way, but I also hope it starts a conversation on how these digital humanities methods can help diversify the discussions on Latin American literature and the different reception theories that have been created but not researched thoroughly. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yay. Oh, cool. Okay. Joan, do you want to share your project at this time?
Yeah, I can go.
Yay.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, can everyone see?
Yes, yes, we see your poster on screen.
Okay, so this is my poster, age-related and culturally specific causes of depression underdiagnosis among older adults, with results from the study on global aging and adult health, also known as SAGE. So SAGE is a longitudinal study through the World Health Organization, which includes 6 middle-income countries: China, Mexico, Russia, Ghana, South Africa, and India. So with this project, I focus on the underdiagnosis of depression rather than depression prevalence, because with depression being the leading cause of disability worldwide, it's important to focus on underdiagnosis because there are bound to be people who slip through the cracks who have not had a clinical diagnosis. So with that being said, we predicted that underdiagnosis of depression would be associated with poor functional quality of life, higher levels of stigma, and poor quality of healthcare. We hypothesized poor functional quality of life being a predictor because if individuals report poor functioning, it may hinder their ability to seek assistance for depressive symptoms or even identify depressive symptoms. And stigma was also seen as a possible predictor because with negative social connotations surrounding mental health, it may lead to individuals feeling uncomfortable with disclosing their feelings of depression. It could also lead individuals who would need, it could also lead individuals to not identify symptoms of depression as depression due to language surrounding mental health having negative implications. And lastly, poor quality of healthcare would limit resources for individuals who would need treatment for depression and also prevent them from receiving a clinical diagnosis. And so for this project, my variables are depression. And so to kind of measure the underdiagnosis of depression, participants were given the World Mental Health Survey version of the Composite International Diagnostic Interview. And so basically with participants given this survey, we were able to see how many people are reporting depressive symptoms, and with them reporting not having a clinical diagnosis, they were deemed underdiagnosed because they did not receive a clinical diagnosis for their depressive symptoms. Marital status is also a variable. Functional quality of life, which is just a 24-item questionnaire about physical functioning difficulties. Quality of healthcare, with people reporting how the healthcare is within their country. Social cohesion, which is measured through a 9-item questionnaire about involvement with friends and community. And lastly, stigma. And stigma was measured through a question: do you think that most people who are sad will tell us that they are sad? This just allowed us to see how comfortable people within their community would feel talking about mental health. And it just gauges how openly people are discussing mental health as well. And so with this study kind of encompassing 6 countries, there is a lot of data to go through. So for the results, I'll just go through significant predictors of underdiagnosis of depression. Oh, my screen went blank. Can you guys still see?
It's
Okay.
back.
Okay. So yeah, I'll go through significant predictors of underdiagnosis of depression across the 6 countries. So it's a lot, so just bear with me. So being female predicted having depression without a diagnosis in China and India. Women are more likely to show depressive symptoms than men, but yeah. So as age goes up, having depression without a diagnosis is significantly more likely in China and also in Russia and South Africa. Marriage did not affect the underdiagnosis of depression across the 6 countries. As income goes up, the underdiagnosis of depression goes down in China and India. As memory gets worse, depression underdiagnosis goes up in China. But as memory gets worse in India, underdiagnosis of depression goes down. As people report worse functional quality of life, depression underdiagnosis went up in all countries. Reports of bad health care in Ghana led to worse underdiagnosis of depression. Increase in social cohesion is associated with higher depression underdiagnosis in Ghana and India, but an increase in social cohesion led to lower depression underdiagnosis in Mexico. As stigma goes up, the underdiagnosis of depression goes up in Ghana, but as stigma goes up in India, the underdiagnosis of depression goes down. So with all of that overall across all the 6 countries, 2 to 15% of people have had depression in the past year, but did not receive a clinical diagnosis. Poor physical functioning strongly predicted having depression without a diagnosis across all 6 countries, suggesting that this is a clear predictor of depression underdiagnosis. And here, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse moving. But on this chart, as you can see, there are large disparities in China, Ghana, and India, showing that the large population were showing depressive symptoms, but did not receive a clinical diagnosis, which is extremely important because without receiving a clinical diagnosis, individuals will not probably most likely identify their symptoms as depressive symptoms and won't seek help to treat their depression, or will label it as something else, which is also why language surrounding mental health is extremely important when contextualizing mental health. And so yes, for this study, it demonstrates the importance of highlighting depression in middle income countries and in older populations as well, in order to address health disparities that are impacted by social influences. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Joan. Yeah. Okay, I think. Joe, do you want to do your set now?
Yeah, yeah. Do you want me to just go ahead and do both of them, like back to back, or?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen. Oops, that's not what I meant to do.
You're also cool.
There we go.
We see a desk up. There we go.
All right. Is that in a better view to where you can see it better?
Yes.
Get rid of the little Zoom notification here. All right. So I did a 8-month-long study for my honors thesis program, and it is an intersectional analysis of heroin use in the United States. And wait, no, go down. All right. So my research question was, how does heroin use differ by socioeconomic status, gender, and race ethnicity in the United States? And what is the predicted probability of use among these strata? All right, research design. So I performed a statistical analysis using the most recent survey data sets ranging from the years 2015 to 2018 as they were made available by the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, the NSDUH. The National Survey on Drug Abuse and Health survey is a multi-dimensional study that is done annually by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. There are 226,632 non-institutionalized U.S. participants aged 12 or older. However, for my study, I actually controlled for age in order to get my data. So I cleaned the data, I performed statistical analysis, and created tables and graphs using RStudio. The intersectional data that I used was gender, and they only made the options available, male and female. Race, ethnicity, I used African American, white, and Hispanic. And then there were 3 levels of socioeconomic status that were made available in the survey, and that was living in poverty, up to 2 times the federal poverty threshold, and more than 2 times the federal poverty threshold. There were some limitations to this study. I think these are important to point out with studies like this. I only used data gathered for the National Survey on Drug Abuse and Health, which contains a total sample size of 201,731 respondents for the years that I conducted my research after I cleaned the data. The survey only included male or female, once again, in the gender category, and that excludes the non-binary and other gender categories. And the third limitation is that it's unable to capture the most vulnerable populations of homeless individuals, along with those that are incarcerated. All right, so a little brief history on opioids in the US. So during the mid-19th century, there were no pharmacists, so you could pretty much just go get opium wherever, like general stores, groceries. You could even have it put in the mail.
Joe, something happened with your microphone, I think. Joe, I'm not hearing you.
And the formula always varied. So different families had different formulations for the formula of laudanum. So some of it could be super powerful and more addictive, and others could be weaker and less addictive. It just kind of depended on which family you came across. So in 1898, the first semi-synthetic opioid, diamorphine, basically heroin, was marketed as a cough suppressant by Bayer. So that was like the first, prescribed opioid. And it was done by a major company who we all know. And it literally, like on the bottle, there's a picture of it, and it literally says heroin on it. So really interesting find there. The League of Nations, so a little bit more history in between there, between 1898 and when the League of Nations put a ban on heroin. So it was originally prescribed to like everybody, but predominantly used by rich people. And so eventually they realized that all the wealthy people were getting addicted to it, and they were starting to show really bad symptoms from that. So in 1925, the League of Nations put a ban on it. And so they responded by creating new
Joe, your audio went out again.
Pharmaceutical companies started lobbying the government because the opioids weren't being prescribed for anybody outside of people that had like terminal cancer. And so they stated that non-cancer pain was going undertreated. And so that leads us to the current opioid epidemic. So that started in the mid-1990s with Purdue Pharma's release of OxyContin, which predominantly affected the Appalachia region of the Midwestern United States. OxyContin was marketed as a safe, non-addictive drug due to the delayed delivery properties. So what they didn't tell people in their marketing campaigns is that if you crush it up, it'll get you way higher, way faster. So in 1998, Purdue Pharma released a video with an actual doctor, so somebody that they had been paying off, stating that only 1% of people that take opioids take the opioid, so Oxycontin, will become addicted, which, you know, once again, they didn't tell you that if you crush it up, and, you know, one of the many ways of taking in this drug was through crushing it up and snorting it. So limited knowledge among doctors about dosing standards and for-profit clinics led to excessive prescribing of opioids. So I'm sure many of us remember in like the, you know, early 2000s up until the early 2010s, I mean, they would give you, you know, Percocet for a headache. So there was a lot of that going on. So now moving on to my results. So this is yes responses. So this is just yes responses out of the total number of respondents. Hopefully everybody can see this graph pretty well. I tried to make it as big as possible. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we're going by the social strata. So from top to bottom, it's male white up to 2 times the federal poverty level, down to female Black living in poverty. And so as you can see, it's like really, really, really high for men. And actually the highest percentage is men living in poverty, but I'm going to get to that next. So another limitation really for this study is a large number of the people that were asked to survey were white. And so there were less Hispanic respondents and less African-American respondents. So that's also really another limitation to the survey. But even with that, the number of yes responses out of the number of respondents is pretty astonishingly high, as we will see in the next slides. So this is showing the percent of heroin use by each social stratum from 2015 to 2018. And so race ethnicity is the kind of reddish, orangish, and green and blue dots. And as you can see, once again, the percentage of, in this case, white race ethnicity of white people were using heroin during the time of this study. It's pretty astonishingly high. And so this is coming to my final results, which I did a study basically trying to find the predicted probability based off of this survey data. And once again, so all of these percentages of future use, the probability of future use based off this data are all astonishingly high. So the highest is white male living in poverty, and the lowest is a Black female living at more than 2 times the federal poverty threshold. However, with that being said, yeah, I mean, even the lowest data here is really high. So you'll also notice that the Hispanic population, what I found was it had the most consistent, that population had the most consistent percentages of usage among all 3 socioeconomic statuses. So the implications of this study, to conclude, the results of this study suggest that the widely held societal belief that heroin is a drug used by African-American populations living in poverty is a misconception. The notion that heroin use is mostly affecting men is also false based off of the results shown in this study. There was a high rate of female heroin usage. This study demonstrates the importance of studying social phenomena intersectionally. All right.
Yay,
Sure.
thanks, Joe. Yay. And then you have a poster to show us, I believe, next.
I do. I have a poster next. Right. And all right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my other study that I did actually this last summer is called Race and Space, Gentrification and Eviction in Tacoma, Washington, with a focus on the Hilltop neighborhood. I conducted this with Dr. Raul Livianos. And it's part of a bigger study that is actually about gentrification in the Northwest. I just chose the Hilltop neighborhood in Tacoma, Washington. So to start, I will define gentrification because there's a lot of people that don't know exactly what it is. So it can be defined as the process by which working class residential neighborhoods are rehabilitated by middle class homebuyers, landlords, and professional developers. This process differs from redevelopment, which is not rehabilitation of old structures, but the construction of new buildings on previously developed land. The point of my research is to demonstrate how gentrification occurred and continues to occur in the Hilltop neighborhood of Tacoma, Washington. So gentrification disproportionately affects people of color. The Hilltop neighborhood has been historically African-American and has a really interesting history as well. But due to the racially motivated practices used by the government and the real estate industry plays a large part in gentrification, was disinvested in causing the neighborhood to become poverty-stricken. So disinvestment diminishes the property values of the properties in all the neighborhoods that it's taking place in, which allows gentrification to take place. So the developers will come in and they'll basically buy up land for next to nothing, and then they'll build market rate or higher condominiums and multi-family dwellings, and they'll charge market rate or higher prices. And so due to the disinvestment in these neighborhoods, you know, and a majority of the people that live in the neighborhoods that are being gentrified are living paycheck to paycheck. So this leads to the eviction. So the city of Tacoma devised a Hilltop sub-area plan, which they termed would revitalize the neighborhood and promote economic development. So according to this plan, developers are encouraged by catalytic project examples to jointly develop mixed income and income assisted population projects to avoid creating income assisted population ghetto or project concentrations and stigmas within Hilltop. So as you can see down below in the pictures, I mean, they're basically really transforming the whole outlook of this neighborhood. And so between 2010 and 2015, 35% of African Americans moved out of the Hilltop neighborhood. So this neighborhood is, the face of this neighborhood has been completely changed by gentrification. Now, going on to eviction, African American and Hispanic populations make up a majority of the urban poor. So we have become a society that is dependent upon rental properties. And so when they increase the rent, most people that live in the neighborhoods that are being gentrified, once again, just can't afford to live there anymore. So they get evicted from their properties. And they've been sent all over the state of Washington. A lot of people have gone to Olympia, but a lot have gone to like the SeaTac region and all around King County. So there has been a steady increase in median rent from 1990 to 2016. The rent increased from 39% in 2016, while the median household income only increased by 20%. So there's a huge gap there in rent and income. And finally, I have some graphs here showing the eviction trends for Tacoma. The blue line represents the eviction filings from 2000 to 2016 for the city of Tacoma, and the red line represents the eviction filings from the same time period for the entire state of Washington. And as we can see, the number of filings in Tacoma make up a substantial amount of the filings for the entire state. They also make up a large number of the total number of evictions from 2000 to 2016. And
I think he froze up. I see him doing stuff, but I didn't. Yay! You froze for that last bit, so we didn't hear how you finished your presentation.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, I was.
And then we just saw the mouse move, and we're like, oh, I guess he's done.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank Dr. Livianos, and I wanted to thank the McNair program. It really helped me out, so thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joe. Wonderful. And then I think we have Tristan. Tristan, are you ready?
Yeah, sorry, I have lots of buttons to press real quick to get connected to everything. So.
Fine. And then I'm pulling up yours.
Awesome. I apologize for the very simple nature of what I've got. I had a large technical failure occur due to a power outage, so I lost a lot of my stuff. So forgive me for the simplified nature, but all right. So what I've been looking at mostly, obviously, so we're all right now, I mean, the reason we're doing this kind of conference is because we're all dealing with a pandemic that's occurring, specifically caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which leads to the medical condition of COVID-19. And so I'm particularly interested in viruses and how they affect human populations and sort of some epidemiology characteristics and things. So that's kind of where I started. This is only a few weeks old, so I don't have, a whole bunch of results right now. But the idea was to kind of look at the evolution of coronaviruses as a virus group, because there's a lot of them, and then look at specifically cross-species transfers and the ways that they infect their hosts to hopefully, I mean, if I was actually in a lab doing things, it'd be what would I look at to try and develop treatments to move forward with to help combat this pandemic. So what I've been doing a lot is a whole bunch of reading, mostly. Some of this stuff, like I've got a paper I'll talk about that just was published 2 days ago. So some of this stuff is brand new. But one of the things that's come through that they came out pretty early was that SARS-CoV-2 uses the same receptor, which is an ACE2 receptor, to enter into cells as the SARS-CoV virus, which was responsible for the SARS epidemic in the early 2000s, which was also very infectious and pretty fatal. It's kind of faded in the background for some people, but of course it's come back through. So it was also found when they started doing more research just recently that they also require a particular, SARS-CoV-2 requires a particular serine protease to be present in the cells or nearby to also speed infection. And if you knock that down, you can stop the infection from occurring. And if you rescue that functionality, you then get more infections. So but doing all this, they did find that you can use antibodies to block the binding of the receptor, the virus to the receptor. Part of the difficulty with this one is instead of the virus protein binding to the active site of the enzyme, it actually binds to the surface of the cell, which causes it to be harder to block because you can't just change the conformation of the enzyme in order to stop the binding from happening, which you could do a lot more specifically if it was a conformation dependent. However, blocking the virus from binding is only actually useful in the early stages of infection, because once the virus has bound and entered into the cells, you end up with what's called a cytokine storm, which sends a whole bunch of pro-inflammatory molecules out into your system, which actually damage you. It's your immune system actually causing you more problems than you would like to have happen in trying to combat this virus. So the next step has been, okay, can we target the mechanisms by which the cytokine storm is initiated or mediated in the later stages to hopefully be able to stop after if we haven't detected it soon enough. So that's a very new area of research that I haven't been able to find too much on. So back to the cross-species thing, because a lot of species have these ACE2 receptors, but we don't see infections in every species. One particular interesting bit was that, I don't know if anyone noticed, but there was news about tigers getting infected with the SARS-CoV-2, which humans and tigers diverged a long time ago in the evolutionary spectrum. So it's a very large distance, which is unique and interesting. They aren't nearly as close evolutionarily, which is kind of a red flag for this virus going, okay, what did it manage to do that it can infect so many phyla as well as it can? So the big thing that determines really is that binding interaction between the virus and receptor. So in studies that were done with the original SARS virus, so the SARS-CoV, they found rats were pretty much resistant to the infection. Mice were could only be sort of infected, but yet humans, palm civets were very oh my goodness, susceptible, I'm sorry, to the infection. And what's interesting though is these are very small changes, like single amino acid changes on either the receptor or the binding protein causes it to either work or not. And that's not very difficult in terms of mutations to achieve those. So what they've found is coronaviruses tend to mutate excessively when they're co-infected, and they co-infect very well in bats. Particularly, bats are often considered a reservoir species for coronaviruses. So when you have these co-infection rates, you get this increase. So the thought is potentially that something mixed in there got to bats, potentially got somewhere else, and then got to humans. And so it's kind of a question of, it's really hard to predict mutation rates and things, but there was structural analysis done on SARS-CoV that actually they found mutations that would be potentially positive for a new coronavirus emerging to then bind. And so I don't know, like one thing I've been trying to find out is if people have gone back to the research that was done there, looked at their predictions and looked to see if anything matched, just for, okay, it's proof of concept, and perhaps if nothing else, it could help for another, if this happens again or happens continually or more changes happening. So that's kind of where I'm at, and it's a lot of, okay, so people did a bunch of research, which then kind of faded in the background because the immediacy was gone, and now it's coming new, and we're getting a lot of stuff. But like I said, the antibody is a positive step, and then looking in at blocking the inflammation, which is what causes the pneumonias and everything else, which are unfortunately what are causing most of the fatalities. So thank you.
Good job, Tristan.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much. Wonderfully, unfortunately topical, and like it's so wild. It's so cool. And
I wanted to mention, Tristan, I don't know if you listen to NPR at all, but in April, they did a quick little bit about the cytokine storm, and it could possibly give you a little bit more information. I don't know if that's something that you're interested in, but I did want to mention that.
Yeah, no, that was something I hadn't gotten into because it's almost, for me, it's a lot more in the immune system and physiology than like I have extra knowledge, because some of it is having to teach myself some of these things that are not my immediate forte. But I will, like I said, now that I found that one, which is just a little bit ago, I will definitely take a look into it and do more. So thank you for letting me know. NPR, you said?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I think, looking at our list, I think that's everyone. I don't think I missed anyone. Just casually 2 hours of presentations and super cool research, all in totally different fields. But that's the McNair bit though, right?
I was going to say, Keegan, we've got, we had planned the session to be an extra long session, 5 to 7. And so we definitely have time for questions and discussion. It's 6:42, at least according to my clock. And we have lots of wonderful guests that have joined us this evening. So maybe open it up to questions amongst our wonderful McNair Scholar presenters or any of the guests who have joined us, and we can open it up to discussion.
I actually just want to take a quick shout out to Barbara Jenkins for being here. Most supportive individual ever. Love you, Barbara.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say I'm Kimberly Johnson. I was a McNair Scholar when I was an undergrad at U of O 20 years ago, now work at U of O. And you all put me and my cohort to shame. That was amazing. I'm so impressed. I can't wait to talk to folks who weren't able to make the call just about all the cool research that y'all are doing. So congratulations, it was really, really awesome.
Thank you, Kimberly.
I came in a little late because I was doing the rest of the symposium. So wonderful to see you all. And I look forward to being able to spend some time with it once this moves to YouTube and catch up on everybody's research. Thank you very much.
I would be curious, if there isn't a question right now, I would be curious to hear from the students in working with your faculty research mentors, as we require all of you to do and encourage you to do it as support systems and guides in this. I would be curious, what was a helpful piece of advice they gave you as you were learning to go about doing research, as you were diving into your discipline, as you were trying to figure out as you went? What was a helpful thing you heard along the way?
Well, I can say that I think my biggest helpful thing I got, especially because this was brand new for me, was a lot of, it's okay to change direction. It's okay to adjust things. It's okay if there's, to kind of, look around, but it was like, if there's a rabbit hole that you really want to fall down, try it at first and see how it goes, especially at least for the type of research I was doing, which was, okay, get into the things that you are interested in, dial it in and find it, and then start working on some of the detailed oriented stuff. But really it was in the early stages, don't limit yourself too much, and just kind of, get a nice broad overview and then find the things that really catch your attention. And I think that was very helpful, not having to have, okay, day 2, you need to have an exact plan of what you're doing and ready to go and no deviations. So it was really nice to have the flexibility encouraged.
Yeah, I think I could go parallel with that. My advisor was incredibly supportive and kind, and understood that, like, while I had big ideas, she kind of helped me wrangle those into manageable step-by-step pieces, because I think where I want to be and where I am right now are not exactly aligned, but I also need to start somewhere. So, it's been nice, like Dr. Budd, I couldn't ask for a better mentor. And I feel very grateful for all of her patient instructions.
To kind of like chime in on that same train, to like recognize that all these projects, when we first started, we knew nothing about them. Like, that's something my advisor really pressed, because there's a lot of advanced computations in Dr. Chavez's lab, and he's like, it's okay to not know what a multivariate pattern analysis is the first day that you are here. So to just like take it one day at a time, and that where we all will be this time next year is just going to be so different from where we are today. And so that definitely was kind of just like, oh yeah, this is all new to me. This is all novel. It's okay to like not know everything right away. But I mean, look at what we all presented today. Like, it's amazing. So.
Did I see you raising your hand? You're muted.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that, and then also kind of adding to it. So with that intersectional analysis of heroin use in the United States, I had to learn like a whole new programming language. So the patience and really the faith that my mentor had in me to do that was phenomenal. I mean, she didn't rush me. She just kind of let me do it at my own pace, sort of. I mean, there was a timeline, but like, you know, she had faith in me enough to know that I would get it done, that it wasn't like impossible. But she also kind of let me just do it myself, which really helped me. But early on, especially with the gentrification one, an important piece of advice I got from my advisor was to not fall down a rabbit hole. Like to really kind of stay focused on what we were really seeking to do. Because especially with a subject like gentrification, you can get really lost in the history of things that have happened previously, because there's been a lot of stuff that's led up to gentrification. So kind of making sure that my focus stayed in that area was really important in completing that study. So I would say that that was a really important piece of advice that I got early on in my research.
Any other thoughts or reflections? End of a year-long journey.
I'll say something really quick, which is just that I've learned a lot about how like just being in a conversation teaches you how to talk about things, right? Just being in the lab is how you figure out how to be in the lab. I just reflect on like my first day walking into my PI's lab and being like, oh my God, like there's so many things that I don't know what to do here. And I guess I'll sit awkwardly in this corner until I figure it out. And that's what happened. And then, you know, it all just built up from there, which I think is actually just, I think it encapsulates the McNair thing, right? Like get into a lab, do something, like you'll figure it out, like follow your dreams. I thought that was great.
It's very fun for me in this particular moment, because I'm working with our new cohort right now to finalize things with their mentors and figure out their projects, and being able to see now so many of you kind of on the other side with these incredible presentations and talking so confidently about stuff that you've been working with for so long and know so much about, even though you gave us a very kind summary of everything tonight. I wish I could follow up with a million questions on each of them. But just seeing that duality of our program and of the life of an undergraduate figuring out how to do research, and knowing that many of you will carry this forward into your academic careers, I think is just such a cool thing for us as staff to be able to witness, and hopefully for you to remember bits and pieces of now that you are big time experts about to graduate.
I personally really appreciate Heather, my faculty mentor. She really just took me in. I was really struggling with, I had an idea, but really didn't have a direction. And she like just took me in and was very just welcoming and supported me. I was also studying abroad too, and had complications with that too, having to come back because of COVID-19. So I really appreciate her, and just learning also how impactful research can be, the research that the Center for Equity and Promotion is doing, and how it's really, you know, uplifting, creating resources for the Latinx community, which fuels my heart, because this is an issue that I know is so real, and just seeing like facts, like these are numbers, like this is proving it. So that's been very impactful for me.
And I just want to say, like, it seems like it's a theme that we all had like great advisors, and that's great. I also was very lucky to have that. And I think it's important to let the newbies come in like how important it is to choose the right mentor, because that could really like give you a good experience or a bad experience in research. And I know, like, for example, for my mentor has let me like go down some rabbit holes, but then come back, also learn like new languages, you know, for coding, and was just very patient with it. And also I think one thing that was very important is that make sure like you're not intimidated. My first interaction, I thought I needed to know as much as my mentor, which is very unrealistic because he has like a postdoc and all that. So I think it's good to remember, like, we're not supposed to know what they know, so we can just speak and be around somebody that can like listen to the mistakes and just help you learn, rather than feeling like judged about the lack of what you don't know. So just something.
Yeah, on that note, doing a meta-analysis, that's not like a very common thing to have a professor that does on like a regular basis. So my faculty mentor was so willing to work with me and also learn with me. So it's important to know that like they don't know everything, but they're so willing to help you learn and learn with you and do as much as they can to help you with your project. It was really cool, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Megan said, which is as a faculty mentor, that this is a process that allows us to learn. And so as in keeping with a growth mindset, you know, it's like nobody is born being a skilled mentor. It's through trial and error. And Yomaira is an extraordinarily brilliant and gracious person. And so there were times when I would make mistakes and she'd be like, okay, let's go back and let's reflect and think about what and it was very, very much a process where we both were just really engaged in showing up and in teaching and learning and in discovering together. And Yomaira didn't say this as part of her presentation, but she literally is the first analyst, because this is an ongoing study. She is the analyst for this entire NIH-funded project at this point. So she is giving us insights into a really important study. And the questions that she was asking as herself a Latinx emerging adult were critically important in terms of what we're thinking about moving forward, because our work is deeply community partnered. And so to have the amazing privilege of working with such just a scintillating young person who has so much that she brings to these analyses, it's not just data. These are life experiences and figuring out how best to promote resilience. And that's invaluable. So I want to thank all of you for my learning, and Yomaira in particular, because this is how we get better at being able to do what we're passionate about, is because we get all of your feedback and all of your willingness to learn together. So thank you.
That's one line of thinking I've been thinking a lot about in terms of the faculty mentor experience, in terms of so many of them are working with students and choosing to always really wanting to be working with McNair students, and undergraduates who are really trying to push themselves and ask these questions and find these answers and pursue them at the UO and beyond. That's I think one of the biggest pieces that I've noticed, at least on my panel this morning, in addition to right now. I'm sure Kevin and Christabel, you've seen this just all over the day and all over the past year of planning this event, of just the whole campus, digital campus now, but the whole campus community really coming together to really be a part of this experience. And knowing that all of the work that all of drastically different disciplines, all of you somehow drastically different disciplines, but all of you just really thinking about, I can see threads of all of it that can connect to anyone in terms of experience or priorities or needs or processes, cognition, social implications, et cetera, carrying forward. I think that's so cool to be able to gather all of these people together. All the other panels have been focused more on discipline, which I think makes sense in a lot of ways, but having the privilege to be able to gather you all here together and kind of see all these things in one quilt of sorts, a collage of research and knowledge, I think is super cool. Kevin or Crystal, I don't know if you have other comments on it.
Yeah, Kevin, I want to just jump in real quick and say that you just hit it right on the head, which is one of the kind of keystones of this program, is being able to have the same room and space as so many other disciplines. And it's like the only opportunity you're going to have ever, because as soon as you move on to grad school, and you're going to just keep getting more and more focused, more and more narrow. The conversations get more and more nuanced and specific and drilling down into the weeds. So I think one of the best things about the program is that you have the opportunity right now to build your professional to build your professional skills as a scholar and be able to then also provide your, dissemination of your information that you're learning out to a broader audience. And you can do that in practice each time you guys interact, and it's amazing. And this was such a joy, and it's like a miniature version of this entire day, but being able to also experience this all the time is what makes this is one of the reasons that this is such a magical program.
We're getting close to time. I just want to thank everyone because we are able to get together here virtually. We had literally just secured a space for the first ever McNair Scholars kind of student lounge, and then COVID hit, and so we could never use it yet. So it was wonderful to be able to gather everyone together, at least virtually. And one of the things I know Keegan and I are excited about moving forward is continuing to be in touch with all of you. And making sure that we can even vicariously live through some of the amazing journeys that you're all embarking on now. And we think there's a lot of exciting ways now that we're all more adept with the Zoom world than we were probably a couple months ago, thinking of ways that we can keep you all connected to the next cohort and the next cohort after that, and kind of build an intergenerational family of McNair scholars, maybe in a way that's a little bit easier to do, even if you're all at different parts of the globe. So I know that's something we're really excited about. And so hopefully this won't be the last time that we're all together in some way to kind of share research. And we just think it would be amazing for all of you to be able to share, again, your continued progress with this cohort, the cohort we're going to recruit in fall, and as we continue to go along. So we also love the fact that we were able to record this. And so this is something we're definitely going to include in our Canvas class for the...
Thank you for this content, this archived permanent content.
So they can see the reality that it is possible to do this, that Keegan and I aren't just kind of speaking in these aspirational abstracts. It's like folks have walked these steps and they have accomplished this, and you can too. So proof of concept for all of them. Yeah, go, Barbara, please.
I'd like to just get a word in before the end of this. I encourage all of you to apply for the Undergraduate Research Award that the library does. The deadline is May 29th, which is next Friday. So good timing. And remember, this is one of the awards on the campus that has money attached to it. So the winners get $1,000 or $1,500, depending on their work. And it is, so you have the potential of $1,500. That is a big recognition for your work, in addition to being able to say that you were very competitive in winning the Undergraduate Research Award. So please do apply. Theses and capstone projects and single term papers back from spring of last year, spring 2019 through this term. So thank you, and look forward to seeing them.
Thanks, Barbara.
But before we all sign off, I wanted to just say to all of the people graduating this year, because we don't get a ceremony, I just want to congratulate everybody and say how proud I am of all of us and all that we have accomplished. And congratulations.
Well, we're having our end of year celebration. I'm going to stop the recording because YouTube doesn't need to have this information.